10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 237. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 237 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Hope everybody is doing well out there and hope you're ready to continue our series on composing. I'm excited about this week's episode. This week we're going to talk about writing a chord progression first and some of the things that you can do to write effective chord progressions. And just like every episode this month, we really talk about how to get over that blank page. That is the hardest part of composition. And if we can get over that part of it, then we stand a pretty good chance of actually writing something. So before we jump into the episode, let's thank our new patrons on Patreon. Now, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, this is a listener-supported podcast, and Patreon is a great platform where you, the listener, can support the podcast directly. Make sure that episodes keep coming at you each and every week in high quality. And if you would like to get signed up, there are two tiers. One is $3 a month and one is $5 a month, and the rewards are slightly different for both of those. But you can go over to Patreon, check both of those out, and decide on which level you'd like to support us. To do that, you can go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up today for instant access to every single episode that we've ever done. So our new Patreons, we've got a new $3 patron. I want to say thank you to Ryan. And we've got a new $5 patron. Thank you to Matt. And thank you to Corey for editing your $3 pledge up to $5 in order to get those extra rewards each and every week. So thank you to everybody that signed up. We've got over 300 people over there, and you guys mean the world to me. Keeps this podcast possible and coming at you. So 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. All right, let's jump into the episode. So last week we talked about writing melodies, and we basically said there's sort of two ways to compose here, where you either write the melody first or you write the chord progressions first. Now, if you talk to composers and teachers, they will have strong opinions on this, but the interesting thing is that they'll have differing opinions on it. And I think that both approaches are valid. I think that writing the melody first or writing a chord progression first can both be things that we can do, especially when we're first starting out with composition. If you're somebody that just gets writer's block every time you sit down to write a melody, well, try writing a chord progression first. Maybe that's the way that your brain works. You can always go back and change that chord progression depending on the melody that you came up with. So we want to have flexibility here, right? There's no right or wrong way to do anything when it comes to a creative pursuit. And I've heard great results using both of these approaches. So we talked about a few ways that you could get started with a melody. Now we're going to talk about a few ways that you could get started with a chord progression. And what I've done is I've written my own simple chord progression this week, and we're going to use that as a base of operations. So I'm going to play the chord progression first. Then we're going to talk about what I was thinking when I wrote it. And those are going to be sort of the starter rules that I will give you to start writing your own chord progressions and get over that empty page syndrome. So here is the chord progression that I wrote. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so few things that you will notice when you listen to that chord progression. The first thing that you will notice is it's not very long. It's not 32 measures, it's only 16. And that's going to be the first requirement when you go to write your own chord progression. It shouldn't be super long, because what that means is that you have to do more complicated things to keep it interesting, more key changes, more everything. So the shorter the progression, the better. So when you go to write your own chord progression, you're only going to write 16 measures. All right. Now let's talk about the actual chord progression. So what I've done is I've chosen the key of C major to write my chord progression in. And that's another thing that you're going to do right off the bat. Just pick a key, right? Pick a major key, and you're going to start in that key. So the first measure is very, very simple. It is just a C major 7 chord. Second measure is just a 2-5 in the key of C. And then I come back to C. Now what I'm doing in the fourth measure is I'm jumping up to a 3-6. And then I'm playing in measure 5, 2. Measure 6 is 5. And then measure 7 is back to 1. So that's a pretty simple chord progression, right? All it involves is 1, 2, 5. And then I have one measure where I'm leading into that 2-5 by using a 3-6 chord progression. And those are some of the most common chords you will see in the jazz language. So I'm not throwing any curveballs there. Now, here is what happens in the next measure. I'm playing a 2-5 to the key of A minor. So this is in measure 8. I play 2, 5, to A minor. Now, how is A minor related to C? Well, it's the relative minor. And that is what I'm going to ask you to do when you're composing your own chord progressions. This is a very, very easy way to get a key change into your tune, into your composition. Just simply go to the key of the relative minor. Right? And that's what I've done here. So we've got that 2-5 that goes to A minor. So now I'm squarely in the key of A minor. And then in the next measure, I do another 2-5 back to the key of A. Okay. Now I want to get back to the key of C before I get to the end of the tune. So what I've chosen to do, and you can choose to do something completely different if you want, I chose to get back to the key of C and end the tune in the key of C major. I could have ended the tune in the key of A minor, and then going back into the top, I could have done something to get myself back into the key of C, but I want to hear it go back to C before the tune ends. So let's explore how I did that. So in measure 12, I have the only kind of funky, semi-complicated thing that I did in the entire tune. So let's skip over measure 12 right now. Let's go to measure 13, because now we're back to the bread and butter. In measure 13, I've got a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And then in measure 15, I'm coming back to that C major chord. So I'm coming back to the key that I started in. So let's look at measure 12 now. So can anybody out there guess why I used this F minor 7 to B flat 7 before I played the E minor to A, before I played my 3-6? I'll give you a second to think about it. Pause the podcast if you have to. Okay, did you think about it? Did you think about maybe what I was doing there? So what this is called is side slipping. So what I'm doing is I'm simply just playing a 2-5, a half step above the E minor to A7. And it just adds a little bit of interesting motion to the chord progression. So I'm just doing something that's a little bit unexpected on your part, and it's just making you want to listen to my tune, my chord progression. So that's like kind of the one little trick that I threw into this tune. Everything else is very, very basic. So let me play. I'm going to start in measure 11, and I'm going to play to the end so you can hear the result of that side slip. And then the very last measure of the chord progression is simply a 5 chord going back into the top, so that it kind of just propels me back into the top of the progression. Okay, so what I want you to do is, the first thing I want you to do is write a melody over the progression that I've written, that I just played for you right now. And for all those $5 Patreon members, I'm going to give you a backing track of that chord progression so you can write your melody and then you can actually play it. Now, the second thing that I want to do is, I've written a set of rules, kind of the rules that we have just gone over, but I actually codified them and put them on paper. And I want you to write your own 16 measure progression using a major key, and then at some point modulating to the relative minor. And that's really the only requirement, and keep it simple, right? So try your hand at that. Those rules, again, are there to just give you some direction, to keep you from going off the rails or being too intimidated to start it. Okay, so what I want you to do is write that melody, and if you want to post it in the 10-minute jazz lesson community Facebook group, that would be awesome. And then write your own chord progression and write a melody over that chord progression, and then post that in the community group. That would be awesome. There are several people that have been doing this, and I'm really, really digging hearing your compositions and taking a peek at them and seeing you do the work. That really makes me happier than anything else, you know, when I get to see you actually doing the assignments and getting something out of it. So don't hesitate to post over there. It's an extremely, extremely supportive community, and people love to see that kind of stuff. So good luck on this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the community group or shoot me an email, 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. I'd be happy to help anybody out with their first crack at composition. This is really important stuff, and it can really make you feel great when you go from a blank page to having your very own composition that you can put your name at the top of. All right? Okay, hope everybody's doing well out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to all of our Patreon members. If you want to get the little exercise from this week, go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get your copy right away. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Have a good weekend. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. Bye.